Welcome to the Dad 77 podcast. I am Kerry Briggs. I'm your host. This is my channel. We'll do a commercial at the beginning instead of the end. Like it, share it, be it, pass it on. I am doing a redo on chapter 17 of Revelation. We've been doing a study. This is episode 23. I'm going to pull the other one down. I listened to it because it gets kind of complicated, and I just didn't like the flow. There seemed to be some areas that when I was doing it, it did not seem to be real clear. So I wanted to redo it. So here's the redo. So in chapter 17, we are actually like introduced to the woman sitting on the scarlet beast, and we are introduced to them like we've never seen them at all. However, Revelation 14:8, the second angel cries out, fallen is Babylon, that great city. So we have kind of been introduced to them, but the interesting thing is in 14:8, when it's saying that the angel is saying that that Babylon has fallen, that is past tense, like it's already taken place, it's done, it fell. But here in 17, it's brought back up, and as if we don't know them and that they are not fallen, and we're really just introduced to more information about them. And this shows you that Revelation is not a chronological order book. You know, when we sit down and read a book, does anybody read a book anymore? But when we sit down and read a book, we read it from front to back, and we start at the beginning, then it goes to the middle, then it comes up with the ending. Revelation is different in that it will tell a story and then back up and retell the story from a different angle, a different perspective. And it does this multiple times. And here's an example of, Babylon has fallen, past tense, and now we see that there is the great harlot, mystery Babylon is brought up again, and we have much more detail about her. Chapters 17, 18, and 19 somewhat go together. 17 is about Babylon and the beast and the fall of them, and then 18 is kind of a lament over the fall, and in some parts a celebration about the fall. And then in what we see also in these 17, 18, 19 is we see Babylon, the beast. We see them somewhat depicted as two cities, and simultaneously two women. And they're talked about as we've already heard that Babylon, and we've connected it. We'll do it again. We've connected it that Babylon is Jerusalem, and that spiritually Babylon is Jerusalem of John's day, not the historical Babylon per se, but the historical Jerusalem. And likewise, then in chapter 19, or even in 2021, in the marriage of the Lamb, we see that there is a spiritual Jerusalem. So we have a spiritual Babylon, which is Jerusalem, John's present day, and then we have a spiritual Jerusalem that is the new city that comes down from God, and it's not the historical Jerusalem. We see that Babylon here is the woman that is portrayed. Babylon is an unfaithful to God, and then the new Jerusalem is the faithful woman to God. That so Babylon, Jerusalem, was unfaithful, so there had to be a punishment from that. And the Jewish law is, if a woman was unfaithful, they were stoned to death. So there had to be a judgment on them. And then the new faithful come from heaven, Jerusalem, is the faithful one that the Lamb marries and takes as his bride. So let's get into the reading. Revelation 17, verse 1. We're going to read through the whole thing. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, from chapter 16, bowls of wrath of God, and came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters," which indicates many different groups of people. So kind of a worldwide versus just Israel, to whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made to drink the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup filled with the abomination and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots. I don't know why I always say that one. Harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the abyss, bottomless pit, and then go to perdition or destruction." So that's really clear right there. You got to know that that's just as clear as mud. Go to perdition, and to those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and is. And this is kind of interesting. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. I was thinking about this. I had to go someplace today, and I was thinking about it on the way. So the ones who dwell on the earth will marvel at this beast if their names are not written in the book of life. So that means that everyone whose name is written in the book of life needs to be aware of this entity. And when it comes onto the scene, understand what it is, who it is, and not marvel at it because we know. But anyhow, that's a side road. Verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as of yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. They are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are called with him are called chosen and faithful. 15. Then he said to me, the waters that you saw the harlot sitting on are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, meaning lots of different people, not just one group. Tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdoms to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So there is a ton of stuff here. And in the other one I did, we went over, but I cut out some of the beginning, and we'll get into this and we'll get through this. So there's a lot of different kinds of interpretations here from different groups and their beliefs. So you have a woman and you have a beast. The futurist says that this beast is a future Antichrist who comes on the scene, takes over political power, and takes it over from the 10 nation European alignment, and then he makes war against the saints. That's a brief thing, but this is very speculative. We've talked about the beast in past ones, where in Revelation there is never the mention of the Antichrist or a person that is the Antichrist. They get this from John's epistles, 1 John 1 and 1 John 2. He mentions Antichrist, but when he is talking about them, if you look at the language, he never says that it's like one person. Oh, there he is. That guy right there is the Antichrist. What he says is that anyone who denies Jesus as being the Son of God and denies God, they are Antichrist. Anyone. Big group. Could be a town. It could be a state. It could be a country. It could be multiple countries. Anyone who does not acknowledge Jesus as being the Son of God is Antichrist. The historical view, or historicist, will say that this is the Catholic papacy. And during the papacy times, papacy time, they were the government per se and the religious part of that world at that time. And so some believe that this is two aspects of the papacy historically, and other historicists believe that it is the Catholic papacy and the apostate church, much like is described in Laodicea, where they've lost their first love. They really don't know who Christ is. They maybe even look like they do, but they don't. And the historicists some of them will say that that's what is depicted here in the beast and the harlot. The preterist view is pretty much that that Revelation, the majority of it, with the exception of 10 through 13, chapters 10 through 13, is about the fall of Rome in 70 AD. And we've talked about this numerous times. So when you get to this part of who is Babylon, the mystery Babylon, and that there are two views of who Babylon is. And this is what I didn't make clear in the first one. We're talking about this entity called Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth, the name that was written on her head. So the first group of preterists believe that this is Rome. And one of the main verses they use is 17:18, where it says that the rulers or kings of the earth, which can be also translated rulers of the land. And so in John's time, who was the ruler of the land? Well, it was Rome. They controlled much of the, quote, known world. So they would say that they were the kings of the earth. In Revelation 18, verses 12 and 13, it goes into the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn when they see that the city, the harlot is being destroyed. And it goes through a whole bunch of things like merchandise that they used to that they would buy and sell. And it says gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple silks, scarlet, citron wood, objects of ivory, and objects of precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and it goes on and on with this whole list in verses 12 and 13 of 18, and they say that, well, this is Rome, because Rome was a central part, and everybody wanted to deal with Rome. However, probably in that time, a better city, if you wanted to say like the best trade or the biggest trade, was Tyre. And certainly Jerusalem also had a lot of goods that they would buy and sell. In 18 verse 20, it says, "Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her." So it's talking about the fall of Babylon, and that judgment is an avenging of the apostles and prophets on her, avenging their blood. And certainly it is fairly well believed that at least Paul died in Rome, and probably even Peter died in Rome. And we know that there were other Christians who were martyred in Rome also, as well as other parts of the known world at that time. If you go to 1 Peter 5:13, this is at the end of 1 Peter. Peter, it's the salutation. And he says in verse 13, "She who is in Babylon," and so it's thought that he was in Rome at this time, and he was calling Rome Babylon. She who is in Babylon, elect together with you, greets you, and so does my son Mark. So it seems like he is calling Rome Babylon. And then there's the 7 heads are later thought to be 7. It says mountains or hills. And in the past, multiple writers have talked about Rome being a city on 7 hills. So then in this view that it is Rome, how do they get to this? Because they also think that it's about the fall of Jerusalem. So these preterists will believe that chapters 4 through 9 are the fall of Jerusalem, and 14 through 19 is talking and dealing with the fall of Rome. Just a sidelight here, the 7 heads being 7 hills could also be said of 7 mountains. And in the Old Testament, they used mountains to depict empires, kingdoms. Several places in the Old Testament, it'll talk about this mountain or that mountain, and it's talking about kingdoms of that time. So that's those that preterists who believe that it is Rome. So then there is a whole group, another group of preterists who believe that what this is talking about here is actually Jerusalem, and that this woman who is not faithful, that God is going to deal with it, but they believe that it is Jerusalem. And if you go to Isaiah 1, verse 21, this is Isaiah talking about Israel and her deal with Babylon and historically. And it says, how the faithful city has become a harlot. It was full of justice, righteousness lodged in it, and now murderers. So here God, through Isaiah, is calling Jerusalem a harlot. If you go to Jeremiah 2:20, says, for of old I have broken your yoke and burst your bonds. Talking about Israel being pulled out of Egypt and even Babylon. Okay, and you said, you meaning Jerusalem, Israel, you said, I will not transgress. When on every high hill and under every green tree you laid down and played a harlot. So there's a lot of times that God called Israel, and who's the head of Israel is Jerusalem, a harlot. And so they would have understood this language being in apocalyptic language, but they would understand that this is in fact talking about Jerusalem. And if you go to the whole book of Hosea, goes out and he marries a woman of harlotry, whether she was before or after, but she cheats on him, and then she comes back and she repents, and he takes her back. And this is what God would do with Jerusalem, do with Israel, is if they actually repented and came back, that he would take them back. And like I said, the readers of Revelation would have understood that when you were talking about the harlot, Babylon, the harlot, that they would have understood it more to be Jerusalem than Rome. So then there's that great city. And we've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again. If you go to 11, chapter 11, 8. Whoa. Chapter 11, verse 8. I'm getting there. I didn't have this pulled up. So this is talking about the two witnesses. And we discussed this when we were there. Their bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. So spiritually it's called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So obviously this is talking about Jerusalem. So, and then in, so we've connected Babylon to Jerusalem. Now we connect Egypt and Sodom as terms for Jerusalem also. If you go to 14:8, it talks about Babylon being the great city. And in 16:19, the seventh bowl is being poured out, and the city is divided into thirds, and then the city falls, and it's divided into thirds. Goes back to Ezekiel, where he's told to shave his head and his beard and measure them out into three parts, and one part is going to be burnt. One part is going to be you're going to take your sword and you're going to chop it all up, and then 1/3 is dispersed into the air. And that's what he was saying is going to happen to Jerusalem and Israel. In chapter 18, I have 18 somewhere. Chapter 18, there is multiple verses that talk about this. 18:10. These people are standing at a distance watching her torment. Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city, for your judgment has come in 1 hour. 16 is, and say, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with precious gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour your great riches have come to nothing. And then in 19, and they threw dust on their heads, and they weep and wail and say, alas, alas, that great city, which all those who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she was made desolate. And then in 21, this is all in 18, Then the mighty angel took a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. So here, multiple places, Babylon is called that great city. And that great city we also saw in 1808, 1810, 1817, and 1819. The first one says that the city fell in one day. The others say they fell in 1 hour. That shows that their fall was very quick, that it happened rapidly. And if you look at the two entities that people say are Babylon, Jerusalem did fall very quickly. It was only a 5-month siege, and then they fell. Rome really has never fallen, was never went out of existence. The Rome of their day did kind of have a fall, a disbursement, but never totally were they annihilated. But that was over decades that happened, with the attacks of the barbarians, that they called them, would attack them, and that it happened over centuries, not decades, not a rapid fall. And Rome never totally fell. Then there's the blood guilt that that is mentioned here, and this is probably one of the bigger things that points that it is Jerusalem. It is the blood guilt. In 17:6 says, I saw the woman Babylon, the great harlot, drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. 18:20. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her, which we looked at already. And then in 24, it says, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints and all those who were slain on earth. And then if you go to 19:2, again, talks about, oh, come on. Revelation. Come on. 19:2 also talks about the saints and the prophets. For some reason, it won't let me pull it up. Maybe my computer is in limbo. It's weird. It'll only let me go to chapter 16. We already did 16, so move on. So the blood guilt is Jerusalem being responsible for the blood of the prophets and the saints and the apostles. And probably one of the most damning verses that talks about this is actually by Jesus himself in Matthew 23. We're going to start at 29 and we're going to go to 36. And who is he talking to? Well, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had lived in the days of our father, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. And Jesus then says, therefore you have witnessed against yourself that you are the son of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore, indeed, I send you prophets, wise men, and scribes. Some of them you kill and crucify. Some of them you will scourge and in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Bershisha, best I can do, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Assuredly, I say to you, all these things will come on this generation. So, back up. He's talking to the scribes and Pharisees, the rulers of the land, and says, all the blood of all the saints and all the people and all the apostles and all the prophets is going to be accumulated, and the judgment of that is going to come on this generation. People try to make that be something other than this generation, but it's Jesus himself, and he declared the judgment for this is coming on this generation, the generation that he was in right then and there. Verse 37, still have 37 through 39. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the ones who killed the prophets and stoned those who were sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers its chick under its wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left desolate, for I say to you, you shall see me no more until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This is Jesus here saying that your house, meaning God's house, God's temple, and that is being left desolate. God is leaving. You are a harlot, and you are a brood of vipers, and you do not consider the things of God. You consider the things of man much more important than what God wants you to do, and God is leaving. And we know that once Jesus was crucified, died, and resurrected, that God then made his home through the Holy Spirit into us, and we became living stones, and he now lives with us, not in coming down into one temple area. So this is the case for this being that Babylon is Jerusalem. And I think it speaks much better because you're talking about having a relationship with God. Well, Rome never had a relationship with God. They didn't worship God. They didn't even know Yahweh until they came and took the land of Israel and came upon the monotheistic people that they really didn't understand, and so they didn't have a relationship, so they couldn't be an unfaithful woman. They didn't have no relationship, so this has to be Jerusalem. So some counters to the fact of that Babylon is Rome. One, reigning over the kings of the earth. And we have talked about this, but I think it bears saying it again or showing it again in Acts chapter 4. I've forgotten the verse. I did not write it down. I think it's So in Acts 4:25, this is Peter's sermon that one of his sermons that he did, and people were looking at him going, "This isn't even a religiously taught person. How does he know this much?" But he quotes from Psalm 2 from David, and it says, and this is in 25, "Why did the nations rage and the people plot vain things? The kings of the earth took their stand, and the rulers gathered together against the Lord and against his Christ." For this is verse 27. "For truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate and the Gentiles and people of Israel were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined to be done." So Peter here, who is the kings of the earth, they took their stand. Well, he names them Herod, Pontius Pilate, the Gentiles or the Romans, and the people of Israel, the Sanhedrin, all came against Jesus and then did what they were determined to do, which was to get him crucified. So the kings of the earth can also be rulers of the land, and Peter recognized who that was. It was Herod, Pontius Pilate, the Romans, and the Sanhedrin. So it doesn't have to be Rome as the rulers of the land or rulers, kings of the earth. The woman sitting on 7 hills, on the beast with 7 heads. This is a depiction of the woman being supported by Rome. Now, they didn't really like Rome that much, and Rome didn't really like them. But remember when Pilate asked, "What should I crucify your king?" And what was their response? "We have no king but Caesar." So they aligned themselves with the beast. Here in this, the beast is Rome. The harlot is Jerusalem. And then in, let's see, verse 5 and 6, it talks about the names on her forehead being Mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. We've looked at this before, that this was a well-known thing that would happen. Is a slave ran away and then came back. He was branded on the forehead or the hand because it's the most visible and everyone would know. And this is the idea here is, whose are you? Whose brand do you have? Do you do and say and think the things of God, or you do and say and do your own thoughts or evil thoughts or thoughts against God? That shows who you have aligned yourself with. The 7 hills. The 7 hills, we talked about this briefly. It could also be 7 kings. And if you look at that, Rome had seven kings, 7 emperors, and the 6th one was Nero at the time of this writing. And then later on it'll say that the 6th is, and the 7th is yet to come, and he will only come for a short time. Well, after Nero was Galba, and he was only emperor for 6 or 7 months. So he had a very short time. So he's the beast with the seven heads. The seven, if you want to say they're mountains, there were seven kingdoms. The Egyptians, the Syrians, the Babylon, Medes and Persian, Greek, and Alexander the Great, and then Rome. And then the seventh would be Jesus' kingdom, kingdom of God coming down, and he's the one who will kill them all, or he will destroy those who need destroyed, and he will rule them all. The 10 horns. A lot of people believe that this is going to be a 10 European countries that Rome dissolved into, that gives their power to the beast, the Antichrist, which we have shown it's not necessarily a person. It could be a governmental entity, and that it can't be they can't be the Babylon in that, because they hate the harlot and they're going to burn her and eat her flesh and devour her, which is what Rome did to Jerusalem. They devoured her. So the beast, Rome. The beast, as I've said before, could be a dualistic thing, because we don't seem to learn. We seem to do things over and over and over and over again. So the Antichrist, or thought of Antichrist, is a government agency, a government that will come against God's people. Will there be a person in charge of that wants to take over and rule the world and be considered the Antichrist? Well, if he wants to rule the world, God and Jesus rule the world, and so you are Antichrist. And so there is that dualistic view that I kind of am leaning towards, where this is what happened back there, but some of this stuff still can be relevant in our day or in the future. I still went long. I tried to get through it quicker, but I wanted to just make sure that we're talking about who the beast is and who the harlot is. The harlot is Jerusalem. The beast is, in John's day, it was Rome, and how they went together and what happened to them. So that is chapter 17. 18 will be coming shortly. Share it. Study it. Like it.